Today, I'm talking to a bereaved father whose son Ross tragically took his own life and who's campaigning with his local MP to improve mental health support. Mike, let me start with you, if I may. Tell me about your son Ross and the struggles he faced.
Yeah, Ross was 31 years old. He struggled with severe depression for over 10 years, and he tried virtually everything to try and get his mental health back. At the end of that 10 odd years, he asked for therapy and was told that he'd be put on a 6-month waiting list. He died a few weeks into that wait. And, he was our world. We always prided ourselves on being a very close family. And Ross was, of course, an integral part of that family. And one of the things that he said in his farewell letter, he wrote a long letter to his family. One of the things that he said is, please fight for mental health. The support is just not there.
Louise, so Mike got in touch with you. How did Mike contact you?
Mike emailed me after the death of his son Ross, because Ross, as Mike said, asked him in his suicide note to campaign for better mental health provision. And it's something that over the years I have just seen far too much of, people trying to access mental health support, even when in crisis, and it just not being there, as Ross said. I think suicide is a silent epidemic that we just don't talk enough about. There is not enough debate about it in Parliament. There's not enough debate about it in the media. And Mike, I just want to commend him on his bravery for being able to talk so powerfully about such a tragic loss and wanting to make sure that it doesn't happen to anybody else.
Mike, just explain how he ended up on a 6 months waiting list, you say. So he explained the severity of the situation, but what was he told?
Well, I've found out since we lost Ross that this is quite a common thing, and some people have to wait more than 6 months. I made it my business after Ross died to educate myself about the whole field of mental health, especially at the crisis end of mental health. And I've spoken to hundreds now of bereaved mums, dads, brothers, sisters. And the story keeps repeating itself. It's tragically familiar. All of these people virtually have said that they had similar problems with their loved one, that they tried to reach out for help. That help is meant to be there. People whose loved ones have tried to take their own lives before and then just being put back into the system. The phrase that I hear over and over again with people like this, Ross and the thousands of others like him, is revolving door. What they find is certainly at their most desperate moment that they're just put through a system that isn't working. It's failing people. And we're not talking about a very small number of people here. We're talking about the main killer of young men under 45 in the United Kingdom. Not COVID, not cancer, not road accidents, not drugs. If this were anything else, we'd be talking about it. We're hearing about COVID every day for very good reason. But we never hear any conversation, or very rarely, about suicide, either in Parliament or, as Louise rightly said, in the media. And I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank Louise for being one of those politicians, one of those rare politicians who've taken this campaign to heart and who is doing something practical about it.
Louise, Mike's right, isn't he? Why don't we talk about this? Suicide, the biggest killer of men under 45.
I mean, that's such a shocking statistic, isn't it? And we've seen over the last few years rates continue to go up and the age of people taking their life come down, which is just absolutely damning in terms of the provision that we have for people. A third of people who die by suicide have attempted to access mental health services and not been able to. I want to see, in every case of suicide, a serious case review triggered to see where services have failed and what could have been done to prevent that suicide. And I want to see a regulator oversee every local area on their suicide prevention strategy, so organisations are held to account. It is thoroughly unacceptable that Ross was on a 6-month waiting list when he died. There is every chance that that could have been prevented, and that is just absolutely heartbreaking.
And how widespread is this problem of people needing mental health support, going to their GPs but not being able to access it? Is it a common problem in your constituency?
It is common, and it's becoming more and more common by the day. GPs are already massively overstretched, and they're not the right provider for mental health services. Too often I see people turning up at A&E because there simply isn't anywhere else, and A&E isn't the right place either. They're there to fix broken bones and knocked heads, not people in mental health crisis. So very often they're dismissed, discharged, and it's often the police then that are picking them up when they're in crisis as well. So we need proper crisis provision for everybody that needs it, and crucially, early intervention as well before people hit crisis. But for too many people, either before or during crisis, it just simply isn't there.
Louise, Mike, back to you. Louise organised a meeting with the government minister for you both to attend. I'll ask you both this question, but first of all, from your point of view, Mike, was it useful? How did you feel it went? Are you pleased that you got the opportunity to make your case?
I'm pleased I got the opportunity. I'm grateful to Louise for facilitating that meeting, which she attended. Also, I found Gillian Keegan to be very empathetic. She listened, and she listened carefully. She said, which I think was the most important thing that I took from the meeting, that she thought that a massive reduction in the number of suicides in this country was achievable. Now, this is not a political campaign. You know, I will gladly accept the support of anybody out there, particularly the people who help make legislation. If they want to support this campaign, I welcome them on board. But I think that, you know, I was cautiously optimistic by what Gillian Keegan had to say. I think she could be very effective as a minister, and but I'll have to wait and see. You know, the proof of the pudding is in the eating.
It's good that you got a meeting with the minister. Were you similarly optimistic about change?
I think Gillian personally gets it, and I hope she won't mind me saying, but I think what was most striking for me from that meeting was that she talked about her personal experience with suicide as well. And actually, the more you talk about it, the more you realise that everyone has a personal story to tell. But Gillian gets it. There's no two ways about that. What I worry is that perhaps the rest of government doesn't, and the fact that in Rishi Sunak's budget just a few weeks ago, mental health wasn't mentioned once. He didn't use the words mental health at all. And I think coming out of COVID, when clearly people will have been struggling with their mental health, that's pretty shocking.
Mike, back to you. Obviously you are bereaved, but you say you won't stay silent. Just put that in your own words. Why is it important for you to take on this campaign now?
I think there's too much stigma around suicide. I mean, we still refer to people committing suicide. That's how we've been brought up to talk about suicide. Now, the illegal status was lifted in 1961. Suicide, believe it or not, used to be illegal, and people were actually put in prison having survived a suicide attempt. So I think we need to be open about it. We need to be transparent about it. I regard the whole issue of suicide as being in a dark corner in the same place that child abuse, for example, was 20 years ago. It's only when we brought all of that into the open that people started to shine a spotlight on it and report it and look into it, investigate it, that we now have a much more healthy conversation surrounding things like child abuse. I think suicide is a taboo that needs to be tackled, because if we can't talk about it, if we don't talk about it, we're never going to get rid of the stigma. And if we're still using the language of the Dark Ages, i.e. commit suicide, then, you know, that shows how much there is to do. Phrases, for example, such as man up. What does man up mean? It means shut up. Take it on the chin, suppress it, don't talk about it. You know, we're men and boys are told that vulnerability is weakness. Well, try telling that to the boxer Tyson Fury, for example, who's, you know, proved himself as one of the strongest men in the world physically, but is also willing to talk about his mental health issues. And I think, you know, a lot of men in particular could take a leaf out of his book.
Where next for the campaign, Mike, as far as you are concerned?
Well, I've started a talk club in Sheffield, supported hugely by the Sheffield United Community Foundation. We hold it every week at the Bramall Lane Stadium between 6 and 8 p.m. Wednesday evenings. That's a safe, non-judgmental space where men can talk about their emotions and their feelings without being judged about it. There's still so much more to do, and I'm driven by those dying words of Ross. And also the fact that I know as a father and within our family just how much pain it creates. Ross had a little boy, Charlie, my grandson, and one of the other things that Ross wrote in his farewell letter was, be brave, be strong, be everything you want to be. And, you know, I can't read that letter without honouring Ross's wish and without trying to do my little bit to try to do the best I can in his memory and in the honour and memory of all the other thousands of others of men and women who find themselves in that dark place every day of the week.
Your words are so powerful that Louise and I are struggling to hold it together. That's a great tribute to your strength of feeling and how you can campaign on this issue. Louise, goodness me, where next for you and the campaign?
Well, Mike and I will continue to work together both at a local and a national level. I think there's much more that we can do in Sheffield to improve mental health services, and I think using the voice of Ross through Mike cannot help but affect everybody that he speaks to. So I'm hopeful that together we can drive positive change so that Ross's death wasn't in vain.
Mike, I want to come back to you, if I may. Lots of people do get in touch with their MP when they need support. Lots of people don't either, but they might think about it, but they might think, oh, well, what's the point? There is a point, isn't there, Mike?
There is a point, yeah. I'm so grateful that I contacted Louise. I first spoke to her the night after the last elections when Labour, I'm sure Louise won't mind me saying, when Labour didn't do particularly well. Louise had been up all night long and following what can't have been a particularly great night for her. She spoke to me and she listened, and she is the first politician who was willing to listen to this story and offer help, because despite everything that's happened to me and our family, we remain hopeful, optimistic and positive. We think that suicide is preventable. And because of that, you know, I'll work until my dying day basically to try and do whatever I can with whoever is there to help me. And as I've said, you know, I can't thank Louise enough in terms of contacting MPs. I've been a journalist all my life and I've spoken to a lot of politicians and to a lot of MPs and not ended up with let's say a good impression of all of them, but that certainly doesn't apply to Louise or Gillian Keegan, the minister.
So I put the question to Mike. I asked him why it is worth a constituent getting in touch with their MP, but actually it's worth constituents getting in touch with MPs because it's good for you, for MPs as well, because it's made you a better MP to learn from Mike.
Of course, you know, we all only have limited experiences, and I have learned so much from the constituents that have come to me over the years with their issues and their experiences. I couldn't be a representative if people don't come to me to tell me their stories and their issues. That's the whole point. I'm acting on their behalf, and so there's no way I can do my job unless people come to me and talk to me about the issues that they're facing or what they want changed.
It's never been harder though, has it, after what happened to Jo Cox and Sir David Amess? How do you stay safe but keep that contact which makes you what you are, what every MP is? Yeah,
well, I mean, I don't think MPs have ever been as accessible as they are now. You know, I have a constituency office right on the High Street in the middle of my constituency. People can Facebook me, tweet me, email, phone. I have an amazing team there that are serving my constituents on a daily basis. So nobody should ever feel or that they can't contact us. We just need to be a bit careful about that. And sadly, I think the days of us advertising where we're going to be ahead of schedule are probably over.